A recent national poll showed that 1 out of 2 of us are feeling more disconnected from our friends and family than we were when the pandemic started, which is on top of the research that 60% of us were feeling lonely even before the words shelter in place were in our mouths. Research also shows how connected we feel to each other is perhaps the most important factor to our physical health, our mental health, our happiness, pretty much everything. So here it is, the most important thing we need, and most of us wish we had more of it. Relationships are what we crave, they're what we gravitate to, and they're what we need in this world. My name is Shasta Nelson, and I've been studying Platonic relationships for over a decade and have written 3 books on this subject, on how we bond and why it matters. As we see our loneliness numbers continuing to climb in the real world, I'm really looking forward to facilitating this conversation about what bonding might look like in the metaverse. How might it help us connect? Nearly every game and social media platform that we all play in and participate in is dependent upon us interacting. But it can still be easy to confuse interaction with connection. Belonging doesn't just happen just by sticking a bunch of people in a room. We can be lonely in a crowd. So whether it's a physical room or a virtual room, we want to be seen. To that end, I'm really excited to introduce you to this powerhouse panel as we look at what we might bring, how we might build those better relationships in the virtual world. But right before I introduce them, let me invite you to join this conversation too. Bring it to social media wherever you are with the hashtag #MetaverseFriendships. And we would love to participate with your ideas, your questions, and your insights. Now to our inspiring thought leaders. First, Megan Fitzgerald. Wave, Megan. Beautiful. Head of Experiences, Product Marketing at Facebook Reality Labs. We have Jessica Freeman, Head of Marketing at Minecraft. And we have Lauren Bigelow, Chief of Product at Together Labs, the parent company for InView, Vcoin, and With Me. So ladies, to start us off right off the top, I would love to hear from each of you. Why is this panel important enough for you to show up here, for you to spend time on this? What about this conversation to you feels really important in this time, in this place right now? And why don't we go ahead and start in the order that I introduced you with and have Megan go first.
Shasta, thank you so much. This is such an exciting topic, and I'm really glad to be here with this group today. I think one of the reasons this is so important right now is we're at a turning point in how people can think about relationships across distance. And for a long time now, we've had the internet, we've had our mobile phones, we've been able to connect with people over 2D surfaces. But all of a sudden, we have the opportunity to imbue that connection over distance with a sense of presence. And at Facebook Reality Labs, where we work on the Oculus VR headset, we really see the benefit of being able to have people feel like they are present with one another in these shared spaces. And that gives all of these new outlets and opportunities for friendships and communities to form.
You kicked us off with the reality that almost every aspect of our everyday life has shifted over the past year. The way we work, the way we go to school, the way we shop. We're spending so much time online, and yet while all these things have changed, there have been there's this fundamental human need that I think we are all experiencing, which is the need to connect with one another. And when we don't have that physical connection, when that's just not possible, more and more people are exploring, how do we make those personal connections in that digital space? One of the most gratifying experiences I've had in my career was when I was coming back from some business trip, and I was sitting next to this woman on the airplane. I popped open my computer to do some work. I happened to have a Minecraft Education Edition screensaver. And this was a person who, if I had to stereotype, I would have assumed this is probably a grandmother. And she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Oh my gosh, do you play Minecraft?" And I said, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do." And she went on to, she was so excited to share with me the fact that she learned to play Minecraft so that she could connect with her grandson. And they lived on opposite ends of the country, on opposite coasts. They rarely saw each other in person, but they spent time together every week playing Minecraft. And so it's that personal connection that is so important. And I think the other important thing that we are all craving now is play. And what is that that release the entertainment that we need to kind of disconnect a bit from the real world. And even entertainment is shifting. We're kind of moving from linear content that's being consumed on big screens to more interactive content that is experienced on small screens. And so when we make that shift, there's this connecting with others, there's play, and the interaction of those two things is, I think, what makes this conversation so interesting.
And even people who are opposed to social media or the digital relationships, we're all having to do it all the time. Like, to your point, I mean, it's actually, I'm sure the grandmother would rather be with her son or grandson, but circumstances are such that at least they can be doing it that way. That's a great example. Lauren, that Together Labs, tell me what kind of gets you excited about this conversation? Why is it important to you?
Yeah, first I'd like to reflect on, I think I might have been one of those people tapping on your shoulder. Jessica, I'm a little too close to that for comfort. But I think what's really cool about the South by audience and this whole experience we're having right now is that such an eclectic group. You have like musicians and inventors and cultural catalysts and technologists and all kinds of people coming together and trying to figure things out. But the one thing that Shasta's already said, the thing that binds us all, and no matter where you come from or what you're about, we all need these healthy connections. There's so many studies. You're happier, you're healthier, you even live longer when you have better relationships and connections. So, you've all heard with any new technological advance, there's these positives and negatives that come out, but people don't like change a lot of times. And honestly, it's not optimized right now. The way that you socialize online have a lot of challenges. But I like to say you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's not like, we're going to socialize less online in the future, or we could just shut it off and not do it. So with that as a backdrop, how do we architect these spaces to be healthy? How do we take into account the human and just the biology and the psychology of humans to architect these spaces? So I cannot possibly imagine having a more interesting space to be working in right now.
And I have to say, knowing that you acknowledge that there's challenges there gives us all more faith and trust. It's like, it excites us to know that you're all thinking this stuff through, and we'll look at some of those challenges and some of those opportunities and advantages here in a moment. But before we start diving in too deep, it wasn't that long ago that I was Googling what exactly is the metaverse. So I would love, before we start diving in and talking about building friendships and connecting there, I would love to have a definition that we can all kind of be like, okay, that's what we're talking about. One of you willing to kind of start us off, and feel free we can build a definition together here.
I'll take one stab. It's just a virtual reality space where users have some kind of representation of themselves and they interact with the computer-generated environment and other users.
I think that persistent digital world is something that is kind of foundational to this idea of metaverse. And what defines persistent, I think, can be debated. But it's bringing our physical selves into these persistent digital experiences and having those opportunities to kind of blend the virtual and the digital into this online community.
I would build on both of those. I think that those are a great foundation, the persistence, the virtual computer generated space. I think one of the things that we look at is the core of persistence being someone's identity and who they are and how they want to take aspects of themselves and their friends and their inventory and their objects and the things they've created from one space to another. I think as we imagine the metaverse, it has so many varied spaces and worlds and things you can do, and it can be hard to meld all of that into a single concept of what the metaverse is. But I think if you imagine somebody gets to be themselves or whatever representation of themselves consistently across this large space, then you can imagine how a human is the center of the metaverse. As much as we call it a digital space, it really is a place where a person can be anyone and experience anything.
So is the metaverse here? Are we already kind of in it, and the ways we're experiencing it are the beginnings of it? Or is this something else that's being built entirely?
I like Lauren's comment of, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. I think it's here whether we like it or not.
So we're in it, and we'll experience more of it and get deeper in it and more persistence. But what we each are experiencing in digital ways we've been somehow living in this metaverse quite a bit, especially this last year.
I think we're just at the infancy of it. I mean, we're just a couple decades in. That's what's so exciting to me about it, the way it will evolve.
Similar to needing definition to the metaverse, we might also need definition to the word friendship. We use words like bonding and community and belonging and friends, sometimes without not knowing exactly what that is. And so as throughout our time together today, I'm going to share a definition of friendship with you. It's when both people feel seen in a safe and satisfying way. It comes down to 3 different requirements, which you're going to see on a triangle. And we're going to share a definition of each of the 3 things that are necessary. These are the things that we can evaluate how healthy or how meaningful or how deep or how close a friendship is by how much it practices each of these 3 things. Let's get started. The first one is positivity. Positivity is basically, we want to feel good. We want to enjoy each other. It comes down to acts of kindness and laughter and humor and hugs and smiles and inspiration, pride, anything. All those emotions that leave us feeling accepted, that leave us feeling loved, leave us feeling like we are okay in your eyes. This positivity is so important. In fact, science is showing us that to maintain a healthy relationship, we want to have 5 positive interactions for every negative interaction, or 5 positive emotions for every negative emotion. That's a lot of positive emotions that we want to help make possible. How are you addressing the need, Lauren, at Together Labs to make sure that we all feel good when we are engaged in your platform?
Yeah, that's really a really seminal question. I think that one of the key things about a metaverse is that it has to play better than the real life, or you probably won't be in it. So if you have negative experiences, you can just leave. And we've actually seen that, in our product InView. Even if somebody's a long tenured user and is very engaged, if they have enough negative experiences, they just leave. So how do you architect a space where you're encouraging positivity? One is that take the negative route and you basically punish people, or mute or do something negative if they get reported, and you validate that was a negative behavior. But the part I think is just as powerful is to think about it like a cultural anthropologist, because every one of these communities develops with its own culture, and try and identify where the positive actions are already happening and figure out how to showcase them, amplify them, reward them. So a couple of examples from the product that we have in view is we have greeters. We have 25,000 greeters, and they basically just, help new users to connect and find people that are common, or they just friend them. And, anybody who's done research on volunteering in a community will probably know that the person who volunteers actually gets as much or more out of it than the person that was helped. So there's a real positive thing that's happening there. And then similarly, we have this concept of a host who can go into a room and people socialize there, but just like a real life party host, they can decide, who gets invited. It might be public to everybody, but then if there's, somebody acting out, they could mute them or make them leave. And they actually, when we have interviewed and tried to research who were the most successful ones, it's just what you would imagine. They entertain people. They keep everything moving and interesting. And we added tipping so that you could tip a host if you're enjoying it. And finally, we have, as kind of the heart of what we do is we have all these creators that create visual assets. And there's like 13,000 of them created every day with all these creators. And they actually are mentoring each other, especially the ones that are just starting out. That's something that we've been trying to figure out ways like showcasing them and in newsletters and giving them more free ads or something. So those are very tactical ways, but I guess the point is just trying to find and nurture those positive things, because that's what makes us all really enjoy the space.
Yeah, I heard in their recognition, which is so important. I heard generosity, which is so important. Acts of kindness, absolutely. Every single one of those you've programmed for, which is really, really beautiful. Megan, I would love to hear Facebook Reality Labs, how you're thinking through positivity and how we can add that to our experience.
Well, I love that point that Lauren made, that you want to make something that is at least as good as, if not better than, what you could be doing instead. And I think there's some really interesting examples we've seen from the broad range of developers building for VR headsets. And one example, which is a product I'm working with quite closely, is Facebook Horizon, which is a virtual world that we're building at Facebook Reality Labs. And I think, just to build on what Lauren was saying around how you can make those spaces even evolve some of the things that we see in the real world, we really think about, how do we make this a positive experience for everyone? How do we create that positivity through the product design? And a couple of examples that we think about that you don't really have access to in the real world is something like a safety bubble. How can you make it so that if you want to create a personal space around yourself where if someone gets too close, you can actually prevent that sense of someone being really in your face or up close to you? Honestly, I've been in some pretty busy bars back in the day before COVID where that would have been a great feature.
I was going to say, we're going to start wanting these in the non-remote world.
Well, and I think that it's all about giving people control. And I think positivity comes from allowing people to be their best possible selves. And another way that we think about this is, if someone does have a negative interaction, we really want to encourage the community to self-moderate and make sure that they're keeping each other safe. But we don't want to put the onus on the person who had a bad experience to relive it when they're telling us about it and take the onus for what happened. So we even think about tools like a buffered recording. So we are automatically recording and rewriting the last couple of minutes of someone's experience. So if they do want to submit something, they don't have to go type it up. They don't have to tell us about what happened. We can take action without them having to really go through that again. So I think the technology allows us a lot of ways to really evolve how we think about driving positive interactions, minimizing negative interactions. And of course, I think all of that is in service of people really being their best selves and finding those moments of the reciprocity, the generosity, the recognition that we also see in the creator worlds and in the spaces people share together is what really drives that positivity forward.
I love that. And you helped presence what is a good moment for us to all realize here again, too, when you're thinking about a ratio like 5 positives for every negative. It's easy to think, okay, let's just keep adding the positives. Let's have dinging bells and let's have streamers fall and that little give everyone a medal and a sticker. But also what you're both speaking to is, let's decrease the negative interactions so that we don't have to have just massive all the positive too. And it's how do you bring down the confusion? How do you bring down the fear? How do you bring down anything that creates a negative emotion? And then we don't have to program as much of all the positive stuff. So there's really 2 ways toward that. And it sounds like you're doing both.
Building on the idea of, positivity is how we make our platforms welcoming, and how we make the player or the participant feel safe and supported and heard. And to do that, we need to figure out ways to allow our players to express themselves in the way that they are most comfortable. And I think that's something, on the Minecraft side, we're spending a lot of time thinking about is how do we provide that self-expression and support the hundreds of millions of players who are coming to our platform every month in a way that feels both unique to them but also familiar. So it's a real challenge and opportunity.
So the more we feel accepted, the more we enjoy each other, the happier we feel, the more positivity we have. That's great. But we need the second requirement, which is consistency, which means we need to do it again and again and again. We want to repeat those good feelings. And so we need shared experiences. We need interactions. We need to build history. We need to log hours. We need to know how to be in touch with each other. Consistency is how we know what we can rely on in each other because we build a history together. This consistency is what leaves us feeling safe. Jessica, would you start us off thinking about it, Minecraft? How do you see consistency in Minecraft?
Right. It's that shared experience that I think people are craving. Mm-hmm. And, especially during this pandemic, but just generally speaking, you think about, Minecraft is this shared experience because it's played by so many people. We know that half of kids between the ages of 9 and 11 play Minecraft. And because it is this almost ubiquitous experience, it has become that meetup place. It used to be that kids would go and, meet on the playground after school, and that's not possible anymore. So, they're meeting up in Minecraft to connect socially, to catch up. It has become this kind of virtual recess, and it's not just for kids. It's something that's happening with older players too. We've seen college students around the country build their campuses in Minecraft so that they can come together and celebrate these seminal moments like graduation, where they wouldn't have had a venue to come together and celebrate were it not for this digital experience. So I think that this consistency is so important, this familiarity, but on the same hand, we have to balance that with innovation and creating new experiences for people to discover together. So it's a fine balance, but one that we spend a lot of time thinking about.
I really want to kind of underscore and build on what Jessica said, because that whole concept of what events are in virtual worlds now and sharing those, that's really an interesting area. And you were mentioning graduation parties because you couldn't have a graduation party. We had, recently a music festival and, a special celebrity. And that whole burgeoning area, I think, is interesting. But also, when we're thinking one-on-one interactions, if you think back on the special people in your life and how you built that relationship with them, chances are you had something in common, like a hobby or a sport, or you were in a class together, and you started having interactions, and there was proximity, so you could see them regularly. And we are working on a new product, and we're trying to figure out, like, what are those key shared experiences to provide. In real life, you do things like watch videos together, or maybe you draw together, or you explore something. All of that is possible. And just like in real life, that consistency and the hanging out together, I have an opportunity to talk to you and we can learn more about each other. So that's interesting. But another aspect that can be counterintuitive is, like, sometimes when you have something called a dysphoric or a negative experience, it can actually bond you and actually break down and make you more vulnerable, in a shorter period of time. And so we've been playing around things like escape rooms and stuff. I had my own version of that the last time we all did a panel together because my video didn't work. And I really bonded with this group because when I came back, they were so nice to me. I will never forget that. I felt just so much more trust. So that was a very tactical example. But, this whole aspect of what's a good experience together is really interesting.
I love that you mentioned the proximity thing. That is what has traditionally been the easiest way to create consistency, is when we work together, or go to school together, is when we line up together. And what's allowable in the metaverse is that we create proximity with somebody who's on the other side of the world. Like, it's creating a new way of doing proximity and of bumping into each other and of engaging with each other, which is really exciting. Megan, anything you would want to add about consistency from Facebook Reality Labs?
Yeah, there's two thoughts that come to mind. And the first, just to build on that idea of proximity, I almost think of consistency as another word for access. And you need to have access consistently to give people the opportunity to reinforce those connections. And so I think one thing that's important to think about for the metaverse, especially where we are today, is not everyone in someone's relationship group, or the people they want to maintain strong relationships with, is going to have access to, in our case, a VR headset, in Jessica's case, to Minecraft. And certainly these metaverses are becoming much more predominant. But one of the things that we also have thought about at Facebook Reality Labs is, how do we connect people across the metaverse into the environments where they might have some of those meaningful relationships already, to allow consistency and even bringing those people together with new things to talk about, new experiences to share. So, for example, we recently launched Facebook Messenger in Oculus. So someone can be on their computer or on their phone, and someone else can be in a VR headset, and that doesn't deter them from being able to have that consistent relationship. And I think another interesting thing to think about, just in terms of our responsibilities and goals around building the metaverse, is How do you help the folks establish consistency when changing your appearance is as easy as changing your profile picture? And so this is a huge opportunity for people to express themselves and really get that positive feedback and create themselves in a new way. But we also have a responsibility to make sure people can really build those relationships where they want to. And so even thinking about the underlying profile picture that someone has, or their name, or how that shows up, I think is just a really tactical but super interesting component of how we think about how these platforms will evolve.
And lastly, we can have fun on a regular basis, but not feel like we belong if we lack the opportunities to practice vulnerability. Vulnerability is the third requirement of all healthy relationships. This is the one that leaves us feeling seen. This is the one that makes us feel like you know us. We get you. This matters. This might be our ideas, our opinions. It might be our dreams. It might be the way we express ourselves. It might be self-disclosure. At the end of the day, every platform is going to look different and is going to look different in different relationships, but we want to feel accepted. And to feel accepted, we need to feel known. And so every healthy relationship has the opportunity for us to feel like we're sharing what's unique about us and that it's received and that it's accepted. Megan, why don't you start us off helping us think through about how Facebook Labs provides this opportunity?
Yeah, well, certainly I think this is a huge opportunity area for the metaverse. And as I said, the idea that people can change how they appear to others and how they represent themselves is a tremendous opportunity for people to slowly express pieces of themselves that maybe they don't feel comfortable or even physically aren't able to express in the physical world. And so there's a huge opportunity to explore representation and self-disclosure through avatars and through the ways that people create and express themselves as a person. But I think another area that is really interesting from the vulnerability aspect is, I think this is something all of us have a perspective on and can touch on, but on each of our platforms, creation is a huge element of what happens in our version of the metaverse. And at Facebook Horizon, I'll go back to our virtual world that we're building, it has a tool where anyone can literally drag and drop around them to build out a world and a space in the VR environment. And to create is so vulnerable. To show what you have inside your mind as the world you want to live in or the world you want others to express is really putting yourself out there. And I think what the metaverse and some of these virtual and game environments enable is unlimited creation in a way that goes well beyond what we've seen in physical world. So I think that combination of self-expression and identity and vulnerability through creation to generate spaces is incredibly interesting and a huge opportunity for the communities in the metaverse.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even think of how we would translate that into the real world when we get together with friends, like what that even, yeah, to be able to create a world and present it with each other. That's a really special thing that is really cool. And Jessica, you've mentioned a little bit about this, even just with Minecraft needing to keep coming up with new worlds to discover and kind of this innovation line, which speaks to vulnerability too. It's like, we've never been here before and this is new and there's some vulnerability here. Where are you seeing vulnerability showing up at Minecraft in a way that's helping bond and build relationships?
Minecraft at its core is a creative platform, and the art of creating something is putting yourself out there. You are sharing something from your imagination with someone else. And I think one of the things that we think a lot about at Minecraft is, how do we create ways for people to share their experiences or share their creations in a way that is most comfortable for them. So perhaps it is, sharing their world with a small group of people by inviting them into a realm and it's just a handful of people. Or it could be as broad as, taking a video of your creation and posting it on YouTube and having, hundreds and thousands of people be able, if not millions of people, be able to watch it. Giving people the tools to share, I think, is so important, but it has to be on the terms of the creator, and giving the creators the chance to define how they want to be expressive, to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I just like to build on what Megan and Jessica said. I mean, that whole aspect of personalizing how you're showing yourself in a world. Megan mentioned that you can be very fanciful and do things you can't do in real life, and how does that relate to the real you? All of that can be sort of explored with an avatar. On InView, there's like 50 million things in our catalog that you can put in your room, or put on, whether it's your hair or your clothes or accessories. And that gives such variety for you to get that first layer when I'm trying to be vulnerable, which is like, here's my interests, here's my, like taste and style. And that's just the top layer. So, also building one, and they said, if you're creating together and you're sharing it, maybe you're decorating your room and showing it, or, in Minecraft, you're doing something and then showing your friends, or on Horizon, that whole act of creation, that is going to get you into, think about peeling an onion. It just gets you to that next level because you've shown more about yourself, and then you have a way of trusting each other more as you go through that process. So I kind of feel like the avatar part is the top, but then as you create and do more together, that tends to happen. But what I find really interesting, and maybe it's relevant here today because there's plenty of celebrities that have made their spaces online at South by, that can be really exciting and positive. You can go and you can watch somebody, expose themselves or be vulnerable in ways that makes you connect and go, oh, I'm not alone. There's other people in the world that are like me. And, whether that's somebody who's really famous because they've been in a film and you've heard their story and you just want to know more about them, they can play with how much vulnerability that they put on their Twitter feed, or, when they do their YouTube video, and you'll find yourself gravitating to people that expose themselves and show who they really are. But the caution is, like, that's only one side of the onion being peeled. Like, they're not seeing you, and it's very easy to get caught in that and feel like you really know them, but it's not reciprocal. So I just think that's an element of the online that develops that's interesting as well. As usual, is a positive and a negative.
I love that you're presencing that, because certainly for us to build a relationship, we need to both feel like we both are seeing each other and know each other and are feeling like we kind of get each other. So it would need to go both ways. So that's what we would, look for in a bonding relationship.
I think you mentioned earlier that we are just at the precipice. We're just at the very beginning of building out, a metaverse. And I think one of the real opportunities that we have is, how do we build the technology to allow humans to express the entire range of human emotion in this digital space. And we are just scratching the surface. You think about emotes and filters and all these things that we overlay on ourselves when we are engaging in the digital space. And yet we still struggle. We still struggle to find the exact right way to allow individuals to express themselves in a really authentic way. So I look forward to all of us, continuing to invest in building out these tools to allow that personal expression.
Well, I can't tell you how encouraged I am to hear all of this. In my work around healthy relationships, there's often a lot of criticism, as I was saying, about the fear of what if we don't really bond when we're in this metaverse. And knowing that all three of you are, and so many others, are thinking about this and really wanting this next world to be as meaningful, if not more meaningful for so many, is really exciting. To that end, I would love to ask each of you a final question of what's next? How can we go further with this? Where do you see the biggest opportunities or the needs, the things that excite you the most? I would love for you to each kind of cast a vision for me and for the rest of us of beyond the features and what we're doing kind of in each of our platforms. Where do you see this going? What's possible?
There's a new stat that basically Gen Z just doesn't even see the difference between online friends and real life friends. And that to me is almost like an inflection point. And it just ups the ante for what we're doing right now. We touched on, I think Megan touched on something before about how you can be anonymous online. And I just find this whole idea of how you represent yourself and be yourself and get the social feedback you would be in real life, that is an area that I think is very complex and I'm really interested. So an example of that is like, you might have heard of disinhibition. It's just like I act in ways that I wouldn't normally do because I don't get the same kind of social feedback. So it even happens in real world. I was just reading about a study where if people have tinted glasses on their cars, they're more likely to run a stop sign because you don't see them. And I know, I'm a Boston driver. I'll admit it. I might have been not like the most politest driver sometimes. Um, and you have that anonymity of the car, but like if I were to meet you and you and I were going to go into a store together, I'd be like, oh, after you. And so that normal, like if I was face to face, there's no way I'd cut you off. So how do you build those really, normal social feedback systems in? Like, is it a special kind of reputation system that you could still be anonymous because that has power, but that kind of moves with you?
You've got my brain all thinking all kinds of things now. It is amazing how much we even can walk into a crowd or into a holiday party and to some degree choose to be very on the surface and have a certain image we put on and a certain pretense, and stay anonymous to some degree. And yet, how different that is when we can go and change our avatar or something. So very fascinating questions. Megan, what's next?
As we've said a number of times, we're just at the beginning and we're scratching the surface here. So there's two themes that I'm really interested in seeing develop, I think, on the work we have to do. We've really talked a lot about how do we build positive environments, how to create the opportunity for friendships to form. One of the responsibilities that we have as the makers of these shared spaces and metaverses is to ensure that the range of the whole world that will be using it feel welcome, feel safe. There's so much work to do to decrease toxicity, to improve the safety and reporting mechanisms so anyone, women, minorities, people from all walks of life and however they choose to express themselves feel like they can be vulnerable and they can be positive and consistent with others. So I think that's the work that has to be done. I think another thing that's just interesting about what's next and also reflecting on where we are at the moment with metaverses is we're talking about the opportunity for these truly meaningful relationships to form. And I think we might be a little ahead of the game here. A lot of people coming into these spaces aren't necessarily aware that this is even a possibility. They might be coming in to play a game, or they might be coming in to express themselves creatively, but they don't think about the opportunities for building those relationships. And so I think just recognizing that not everyone is coming in with the same intention, and it's about opening the doors to those opportunities. I loved what Lauren said about building the just ecosystem and the opportunities for people to connect, knowing that might not have been why they first came, but I do think that that's the reason people will stay, is the connections that they make in the communities that form.
Yeah, I will just jump in and build on that because, when we think about, what's next for Minecraft, we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome, because we know that when people come into the game and when people feel welcome and when people feel that sense of belonging, you become more creative, you become more collaborative, you become more connected, and it just becomes this positive reinforcing cycle to drive engagement and collaboration and creativity. So it's about how do we create as few barriers as possible for people to be able to express themselves, and so they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel supported, and it becomes that positive reinforcing process.
You all give me much hope, and even just listening to you, I'm thinking about how there's going to be advantages to this metaverse that we aren't all experiencing in the real world. I hate to say the real world because I think everything online is real too. But yeah, in our in-person lives, there's a lot. We live in a world that has been not of benefit to everybody. And so to be able to think that we can be creating a world, and I love that we have 3 women who are helping give that voice to the conversation of what can we do if we actually have the chance of creating a different world that we can all play in. How do we make that equal for everybody? It gets me, frankly, very excited and hopeful for what you're each building.
I think Megan had a really great point about people don't even realize that maybe connecting is the key thing. And I think as the metaverse builds out, you're gonna, if it works the way that I assume it will, you're gonna be, already elements are there. You can explore, you can create, you can compete, you can collect things, but really, the reason why we're all here, and I think we recognize the connection part is the most important, and maybe people don't realize that. The old play for the game and stay for the community kind of thing. So.
Well, when you see the statistics that I started with at the beginning of how high loneliness is, of how high our sense of disconnection is, the invitation is there to, the challenge is there to really say, I think we can do better than that, and I love that all of your stories had to do with us not just using technology to connect while we're in there, which is so cool and important, but also to use that technology to connect with people outside that we have relationships with too. And so being able to see this building relationships is really encouraging.
If I wanted to imagine the world in the future, I would hope that people would just a simple way. You can't even imagine a world without typing something into a search box or using a calculator or something. There'll be all these tools we can't even imagine to both find people and, do things together, share things, keep that consistent. Because I don't know about you, but the people that I've kept in my life, often it is about the consistency. You find a way to kind of reconnect with each other, and then just find ways to make it more positive. So all of those tools I'm hoping develop over time. Even as simple as like, what do I say to you? Like, I don't even know you, and having suggestions there.
Yeah, I think what's so powerful is we can break this down as we did, and you each did such a great job of giving illustrations to that. And that is that we need to feel good, and then we need to repeat that experience, and then we need to feel like every time we're repeating that experience, we're getting to know each other a little bit more, which is the vulnerability. And then as the response to that vulnerability, it needs to be more positivity. We need to feel accepted for what we just revealed, for that world we just put out there, for that self-expression we just showed. We want to feel received and welcomed and greeted. And then we want to do it again, which is the consistency. And then we share more. And so those three things just keep happening over and over and over in so many different ways. And whether somebody's wanting to bond or not, that's one of the most powerful things I love about this work, is that we can pretty much guarantee, and you can actually program it, which is amazing. We can almost guarantee that if we do these three things with people, we will bond with them and we will end up feeling closer, which is such a big need in this world.
And creating that virtuous cycle.
Yes, I love it. Well, thank you, Lauren, Jessica, and Megan. I wish you and your teams at Together Labs, Facebook Reality Labs, and Minecraft the very best as you intentionally pioneer community on your platforms. It gives me so much hope. And thank you to all of you who have joined us. We know that you've been on your screens a lot, and so it means so much that you're willing to show up for a little bit longer on another screen. And we hope this conversation has inspired you. We hope that it leaves you thinking about your own relationships in the real world, and also in the ways that you can show up and try new things and practice new things and be ready in whatever worlds you're creating and participating in, that you can help create connection for yourself and for others there. I want for all of us that we would all feel seen in safe and satisfying ways, which comes when we do that vulnerability, that positivity, and that consistency. So for whatever world we find ourselves in, may we all feel more connected.